Welcome to the Levin podcast in person, not for you listening, but for us here in the studio. Molly and I are back in the studio. Welcome back to the studio.
It's good to be with you live, face to face.
This is so weird, and I will tell it forever that Molly and I were in the studio the day that we were kicked, back home for the lockdown in 2020, and now we're back in the studio, and it feels very surreal because it feels like it's been 3 weeks, but it has been a minute.
It's been 2 years.
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
Which is really, really crazy.
Yeah.
So today, though, there's a bunch of new things happening. Besides us being in the studio, we're also joined by someone new. So first, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kristen Blazek, and I am coordinator of student recruitment for the College of Urban Affairs, and I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, the Levin podcast. Molly
Schnoke. I'm with the Center for Community Planning and Development at the Levin College.
And my partner in crime in these.
Partner in crime.
And today we are here with someone new from a new college that we normally talk about the Urban College, but today we're going to talk about the College of Education. So do you want to introduce yourself? Because I'm so excited you're here.
Sure, yeah. I'm Amanda Yurick. I'm a faculty member in the College of Education and Human Services, soon to be merged with Urban, coming up very soon in July. I've been faculty, I'm completing my 15th year on faculty, and so I teach courses in special education and applied behavior analysis, and I'm also the director of our Community Learning Center for Children and Youth, which is what we're talking about today.
I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on it where I was going to start. We're going to start with the reason why I'm really excited that not only we're in this space, but we're talking with you is because the College of Urban Affairs and the College of Education, along with the School of Communication, we're all going to get together and be buddy-buddy. And the importance of urban and education. Because for me, I feel like, why hasn't this been done sooner? Because, everything that we teach up in urban, it all does correspond with education. Everything you teach down in education corresponds with urban.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, education being an infrastructure of urban environments and certainly central to what we do at Cleveland State. Cleveland State, has a focus on urban education, urban development, and so forth. And so I'm excited about the merger. As things change, it can be bumpy at times, and there's always, shifts and things that you have to adjust to. But I'm excited because I do think it's a very likely marriage. I think it makes sense.
I think so too. And in the time that I've spent down in the College of Education and everything like that, we talk about redlining a lot up in the College of Urban Affairs and how that, and then I went down to education and they're teaching the same thing and how they had to do with education. So it's like, this goes together completely. So
Right.
I am excited for that. And so speaking of that, we're going to be talking about some infrastructure and some things going on with K through 12 today, which I talk a lot about higher education. So we're going to talk about K through 12 today. And the first thing I really want to talk about is what was the status? What was going on before the pandemic in K through 12?
Oh, something is always going on, but I mean...
Everything's going on.
Yeah, I mean, our focus in education has always been to see, to optimize student success. So really, as we, I could go back many decades historically, but we've moved into an era of really facilitating optimal outcomes for students now. What goes hand in hand with that to some degree is always assessment. And so you always hear about we're actually in what we call testing season right now in terms of K-12 education. At this time in the year is when kids are evaluated and districts then are evaluated and states are evaluated and on and on and on. So as with any discipline, we sort of go through our cycle of development. And so in education, prior to the pandemic, at this time of the year, they were getting ready for testing season as typical, which drives a lot of how schools are funded, how they receive funding, what they draw funds down from. And it was right at this point in time that everything went, right? It stopped immediately right there. And I remember, I'm a parent, so I have school-age children, and I remember them coming home, and at first it was, we're going to have an extra week of spring break, which sounded great, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, a cute story is during that winter prior, my son, like all kids, they want snow days, right? So he had been praying for snow days, snow days. But they weren't coming because climate change. But, whatever.
That's a subject for a
different time.
Climate change.
But we weren't getting these snow days. And then all of a sudden, the school said, the district said, okay, we're getting an extra week of spring break. And then as we went through that, it turned into 2 more weeks of spring break. And then they said, okay, we're going remote. And my son, Trey, he goes, well, I just wanted a snow day. I didn't know they were going to send us home forever,
Right, right.
So everything just sort of abruptly shifted. And in that shift, teachers who were charged with their typical day-to-day, work of, at this particular point in time, testing, had to move remote. How do we do that? Right? So how do we evaluate kids for all these, state and federally mandated reasons? And then how do we just teach kids, in this format of, now where I used to have you right in front of me and was ready to do this, now I have to find ways to do this from a distance and with like multiple kids,
Right.
Not to mention family involvement and everything. I mean, there's so many levels to it.
I think that's what I was going to ask next is, so when schools went, on lockdown, which the day CMSD went on lockdown, I thought was never going to happen. I thought for sure they're never going to go. There's no way they can go on lockdown. What did it look like for the different school districts, the different schools to go down for lockdown? Like who had it harder and who had it a little bit easier to go down for lockdown?
I think if you asked anybody, nobody would say that they had it easy. I would probably be the one to report, I particularly in my own home had the easiest transition because my kids are well situated in terms of having technology, access to internet, not to mention me there with them at home because CSU also was going remote. So now I'm teaching from home, not to mention I'm a faculty member in education, so theoretically I know something about teaching, right? So I mean, some people were better positioned. Now others, I mean, it really is the perfect storm of absolute, chaos for families because you have kids who, the routine of going to school affords them not just an education, but a lot of other things that are necessary. Access to peers, socialization, access to wellness programs, food, nutrition, and the list goes on. And so we rely on our schools in such a fundamental social capacity that I don't think schools really all the time get credit for. You know what I mean? We get thought of as, oh, you just go there and you learn to read, you learn to write, but you learn so much more and you rely so much on those structures in your community to support families. So you have families who the parents, if they are, working wage positions, are still going out in a very dangerous environment, don't have child care, can't afford child care, have kids who are home, tasked with essentially, if they have technology, logging on, like, hey, I mean, I have great kids. I love my kids. If I leave for the day, go, hey, just log on and do your work. You know what I mean?
That's not going to happen.
It's not
we
going to
do
happen.
No.
Right? I mean, there's everybody
Well,
is.
and there were problems with it at the beginning too. Right?
Oh my goodness.
Getting on Zoom and the overcoming the hurdles of daily use of the technology and stuff going down that school districts had to deal with.
Right.
And kids, my kids included, I can't get on. Right. And then at some point they give up because, as any 10-year-old, or younger child would, you're not persistent. You're not persistent in that. I mean, as you talk about testing, at that point, that all that goes out the window.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just,
can I get on?
Can I get on? And did the kids show up?
Right.
And you had the whole problem of, in a lot of school districts, the reports coming out in the media were they were losing kids. They just weren't even there. They weren't showing up. They weren't logging on.
That's right.
And the worry then of also what's happening to them.
That's
right.
We
were talking about the social sort of infrastructure that schools provide too. So what is happening to these children in the interim when they're not in school, they're not online, there is no way of reaching them?
Right. No, we had a tremendous influx of just things that we always knew were simmering under the surface of, there's certain things that we do well in education, there's certain things that we don't. Everybody has the things, skeletons in the closet behind them. And there were certain realities that we were just smacked with right in the face of like, wow, we're not doing a good job at X, Y, and Z, and scrambling in a time where we're all truly stressed and concerned about the safety and welfare of our own selves, our immediate family, our extended family, in a time where we didn't know what this pandemic, what this virus would really would manifest to look like. And so we do have kids then who are not showing up. And a lot of us, it's like, we say this stuff and it's not like families are, and we get this feeling sometimes of like, well, if mom would just, or if that kid would just, and I really want to underscore the fact that everybody did the very best they could.
Yeah.
I promise you, everybody's doing the very best that they could. And the reality is that there are times where the internet is out, the computer's not charged, the platform is locking them out, right? And the teacher then is tasked with trying to navigate this times 25 different kids in her class or his class. It was just a really Herculean task. And now that we're 2 years out, I think, I'm really happy to say that I think that we learned some really valuable things from it. We really learned how to do some things well. So to put the positive on it, while there were these times of like real touch and go times that you're like, oh, this is not going so well, we really did. Education, I've been very proud to say, has been very responsive and reflexive and been able to adapt and keep what worked, refine what worked. And even then in that subsequent fall, so in spring 2020,
it was a free-for-all.
It was a free-for-all,
yeah.
Totally. I mean, I remember my kids' classrooms, like some people are using this platform. If you log into some, I don't know how old your kids are, if you log into something called Clever, there's like 25 platforms.
Clever's familiar to me, yes.
You can choose from that. You're like, it's like choose your own adventure,
Right.
like Schoology, like
Mm-hmm.
it's so many things. And it was just not organized. By fall, we kind of got ourselves, it got under us. Okay, we're going to use Google Classroom, and this is the platform we're going to use. And it was a little bit more well-rounded. But we were still experiencing things like, is it really now reaching kids, or are we just doing busy work, right? Mm-hmm. So we're on a platform. So what are we calling, like, what's the line here? What does it mean, teaching and learning?
Right.
Does it have to be in person? Does it have to be synchronous? Can we do it asynchronous? I mean, just a myriad of questions kind of blossomed from this. And, in terms of like the work that we do in the center, my position becoming director was not foreseen or planned, and was one of these pieces that kind of emerged from the soil of the pandemic and a lot of different things. And we were able to respond to some of these things and change the way we did things to try to meet families in ways that made more sense, that could engage their children in more meaningful ways. That a teacher, given, one teacher and 25 kids on a screen, just can't. So there's been a lot of changes, and I do think that some of them have been wonderful additions to the field that we may not have done had we not had to.
But are urban schools still so under-resourced that a lot of what has been learned and integrated into better practice in schools still is out of reach for a lot of school districts? Or they're still behind, it's still very difficult for them to do, or some of those things are even difficult because of the populations they serve?
So I would say maybe yes to the latter point that you made. Difficult because of the populations that they serve. There can certainly be more difficulties. But what I will say, to the good, is the way we responded in actually meaningfully delivering funding and support to needed infrastructure, schools included, was enormously beneficial. Has been beneficial, where we don't, I'm not going to say never, we do see gaps still sometimes in technology availability or, internet access and those sorts of things. Those things still exist. But having been in this field for many, many years, decades now, I've seen times where it's like the wheels just turn too slowly to make any difference. And the pandemic made those wheels turn a lot faster.
You needed rapid response.
That they just never had before. So I was really pleased with that. So in terms of ensuring access to devices and internet and different policies related to attendance and retention and credit recovery and these sorts of things, our urban districts, particularly ours in Cleveland, I think has been really encouraging. I mean, I'm very encouraged by that response that I saw. The difficulty is that we still lack this fundamental connection with families. We still lack, so school still operates as like school, and home still operates as home, and the webs of communication between and among still need that support, still need that boost, someone to be, you know, and schools have done a terrific job, but the reality is when we have families who are, like I mentioned before, you know, frontline workers. So these are people that, you know, continued to work full-time in person during all stages of the pandemic. When we have families that, you know, mom and dad are gone by 5:30 in the morning or not returning until 9:30 at night or on different shifts and so forth, it just doesn't align with our typical, well, school happens from 8 to 3.
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is how we work, but that's not how families' worlds work.
The entirety of society is built around sort of that 9 to 5 clock.
Right.
Right? For childcare, even before that.
Right.
And the pressures of, you know, I can't have late meetings or early meetings, or my kids come home at this time, and different school districts, you know, one might be out at 2, one might be out at 4, and
and one goes in at 7 and the other one goes in at 8:30, and you know, it's even school time right now with working. How do you work 8 to 5, but your child goes to school from 7:30 to 2?
Right.
There's a lot of juggling that takes place for everyone in some ways, regardless of what job you have in those kind of 8 to 5 hours
Absolutely.
of the day. That has to have been even just more exhausting to figure out and navigate when you're talking about these dynamics now of I have to go, right? I was in a position where I got to be home too. I do not know what I would have done and what things would have looked like had I not had that. And you hear from other people what that was like, and you're dealing with some of these school districts where it's a lot of these people are frontline workers. A lot of the parents have to go to work.
Right.
Where are the resources? Where is the community that comes together to ensure that there is someone for children to turn to?
Right.
When parents aren't home, when home is a question mark.
That's right. That is right. And the thing is, especially when we have, you know, parents are tasked with, okay, my kid has to get on. They're, you know, parents are in their day. You just saw me before we got on here. My daughter's school is calling and I'm responding to an issue at my daughter's. It's an all the time thing, right? But parents still have to go do their work, do their job, and they're trying to be all things to all people all the time. And I think we just don't recognize how tough and taxing that is, and that people will not be perfect all the time. So when we have kids who are not logging on time, right? And the school's over there wagging their finger, oh my goodness, we just got to get the parents to do this. And the parents are over here like, what am I supposed to do? Be a full-time worker and be a teacher too? And now I have multiple jobs and I can't, you know what I mean? It's just asking the impossible. So looking for these niches, you know, where can I come in and help? How can we come in and help? And one of the things during that time, that chaotic March 2020 time, the CLC, you know, I was going to ask you, can we talk a little bit about the CLC? Because you've said it a couple times, and I'm like, just so that everyone knows the great work that you guys are doing over in the College of Education and CLC, soon to be merged with us. What is the CLC? What is the CLC? It's the Community Learning Center for Children and Youth. It's a center in Julka Hall on campus here, a physical space in Julka Hall, which has coordinated experiences between College of Education teacher preparation courses. So people who want to become teachers, and they're in the classroom, and their professors are professing to them, as we do. And they get to come into the center to be partnered with small group with K-12 learners from around Cleveland, whose families sign them up to come in and get extra support, right? So they can come in, and it's like the pre-service teachers get to practice what they're learning about in the classroom, and the families get some additional, one-on-one attention for their children for whatever needs they might have. And it's a cooperative effort that's always been offered completely free of charge to families, and really allows some more engaged experiences for our pre-service teachers who are just getting their footing underneath them. This is before student teaching or anything like that. So it's like, yeah, I think I like teaching. I'm learning about it, but what's it really like? And it kind of puts them in a low-stakes environment, right? Like just one kid, two kids in front of them, no, well, if it's my class, I'm hovering over them, making them nervous. No, but no big, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this is my student teaching, I have to do X, Y, and Z. It's more about providing that sort of informal environment for them to work. So that's always been in existence in person, right? So that, and this is how I came to use the center. I always use the center as faculty. So for my courses, we would come in and we would do, individualized differentiated instruction for kids with learning disabilities or without disabilities who just, at risk needed some help in literacy, math, and different content areas. I always used it in person. And like I mentioned before, the confluence of events and the changing structures of the university and so forth left the CLC in kind of a gray area. Like, will we continue to support it? Because it doesn't have its own, support line or anything like that. So will we continue to have a center? And I'm a person who's used it for my classes and loved it. And I'm over here like, oh, I don't want to see the center go by the wayside, but you kind of play chicken with it. You kind of wait.
I always saw it when I would go in for classes. I always saw the students like lining up to leave, and like I'm walking in for class and watching these kids being picked up and taken, and so I always see the room for the CLC and when you just walk in Jolka.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space, and I didn't want to see it, not be used, but in conjunction then with the pandemic is happening, there was kind of like, okay, well, we'll just put it on pause because nobody's going in person. We can't do this right now. And in my mind, I was like, I don't think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and try this. So I said, I'll try this with my classes. I'll do remote experiences. And I met with the, department chair and dean and everything. And I said, yeah, I'll try it out. let me have at it.
It's a time for experimentation. Everybody's
everything was off the rails. So I'm just like,
we experimented and had the podcast on Zoom.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
We
so you're just trying stuff. And
yeah.
I've always been a big proponent of this. I tell my kids all the time, I just keep trying stuff and see what works out. That's kind of been my go-to method of, doing life. So I'm like, okay, I'll just try this out. And I sort of redesigned my course, made some shifts in it, and I moved to Zoom because one thing I found out very quickly was accessing platforms that are internal to structures. So either like CMSD's internal platform or CSU's internal platform caused me all types of problems.
Right.
So that's out the window off the road. And since nobody's really guiding this, I was sort of free to just develop how I wanted to develop it. And I said, okay, we're going to use an equally accessible platform, Zoom, that parents can get on, kids can get on. I developed these consents. And then I came into the directorship on the CLC, so I shifted everything into the website. So things that would have been done on paper in the center, everything goes over to the website, a registration system, all of those sorts of things, so that we effectively moved everything that was done in person online. And I did this in the course of a summer so that when we, came back, I said, okay, we're going to run programming with the College of Ed classes that doesn't just meet after school but meets during the day. And what this allowed was to work with kids. So we were just talking about kids aren't logging on, they're not engaged. Now we have a whole cohort of additional, hands on deck, virtual hands on deck for students who will work with individually the kids who are now, they're supposed to be on their Google Classroom, but the teacher's like, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. And in real time, I'm not kidding you, if you could see my cell phone during this time, thousands of text messages, because we're really mediating it right now. So teachers are saying, where's Jonathan? He hasn't showed up. And I'm texting I created a position, the faculty family liaison. This woman is tremendous. Shout out to Casey. She
snaps to Casey
in real time is texting kids, texting their parents, calling them, hey, having trouble logging on, let me help you out. You know what I mean? Like someone who actually is reaching out in this moment. It's not waiting for an attendance sheet, you know, at the end of the day. Oh, they didn't show up, so we'll send out an email 2 days later. It's right now.
It's a real-time intervention.
It's real-time intervention.
How does that translate to back to school now?
So in terms of back to school, I mean, it's like in the classroom, who, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
how do you do that?
How do you do that in the physical, you know, kind of space? But I think that, you know, kids, because the other pieces I forgot to mention now, so we mentioned like what we learned from the pandemic and what's changed. Now kids have come back to school, but you know there's a whole bunch of kids that still are online.
Yeah.
So the amount of online education that we used to have it as an option, but it was always kind of like that hazy, dark corner.
Yeah.
He goes to school online.
Yeah, like
Nobody
the
knows what
online
it is.
homeschool. Yeah.
Right, like it's something else, it's something different. But now it's an integral, equal part of the schooling platform. So we have kids who are in person, right? They're your regular kids. We're showing up, we're getting on the bus at 8 a.m. and we're staying here till 3 and we're going home. Then you have kids who are either synchronously online or asynchronously online. Most districts now offer a virtual platform. So it used to be like this one company, you know what I'm saying? Like Ohio Online or something like that. But now all districts have that option for their students. And so districts are now kind of navigating all these different platforms. It's very complex, you know, and the type of education kids are getting. But what we do know, and this is the downside, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not a big proponent of, but I'm very open-minded to different ways of schooling.
Yeah.
Right? So I think this is something different from people think you must do it in person. I don't go as far as saying you must do it in person, but I do go as far as to say if you're going to do it virtually, remotely, that there has to be certain things attended to. Certain aspects of quality instruction that we know that we get in the in-person has to have an analog accounted for in the remote. You can't just be like, just
forget about that. It's not
right. Just go do your stuff. You know what I mean? You might have one kid in 100 that's going to be that real gung-ho kid that's going to be like, okay, I just learn on my own. But for real,
very
that's
few people
that's
handle
not
that.
happening.
And adults, the same
Of
way,
course,
right?
Same.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, I know before the pandemic, which I thought was crazy, before the pandemic, there was a school district in Colorado, because I was watching like the YouTube family, right? And they were documenting their life. And their daughters were in high school, and their high school had the option that you could take a week, and it was like a mental health week. And you could do a mental health week and not come into school, and you would do all the work from home, and there'd be online modules, and as long as you completed those modules, you could do it. They weren't counted as absence or tardies, and you got so many weeks a year that you could just say, I can't handle high school, right? I can't handle everything that's going on, and I want to stay home. And I think we as adults kind of have that, where we have sick days and vacation days where we can say, I can't handle work right now. I have to take a break. And to expect kids for 9 months out of the year to not have a break or anything like that. I like the idea of going forward with having like that kind of mental health option.
I cannot endorse that enough. And I, in my own, I mean, just as a personal aside, in raising my own children, one of my real crucial considerations is teaching them how to manage their own stress load, their own stress level. And so something like that, which is important not just to afford, you know, younger people the same things we afford ourselves that we know we need.
Right.
Not just to afford that to them, but to really begin to teach and turn over ownership of, you should recognize when your plate is too full. Start to analyze your own internal cues. Like I think about my son, and he's a kid who he's so diligent. He's so overly diligent. I mean, he's a fantastic kid. The thing that a lot of parents are like worried about their kids failing. I'm worried about him over excelling sometimes. That you have to look at what is your plate, what's manageable for you, and when do you see those cues of like, I just can't handle this anymore. And do you have the tools to address that proactively for yourself before you become, enthralled in these really stressful, challenging, and detrimental situations for yourself. I think that is something that must be explicitly taught in a curriculum, has to be explicitly afforded to kids. Because what we've learned is, like, we can all handle only so much. And we need to take responsibility for what we can handle and what we can't handle. One of the things I tell my students all the time, when I have students who come to me who say proactively, like, hey, I think I'm going to drop your class this semester, X, Y, and Z. But they have a real good rationale for, this is what's coming up, this is what I can do and what I can't do. I think that's an exceptional student. I think that's somebody who can really sort of have a real good trajectory for their progression. You don't have to do all things all the time, all perfectly. You just have to look at, like, what's manageable for you. And I think something like that very much should be incorporated in school districts. And I don't know that I've seen anything quite like that, but I have seen school districts be more amenable to different reasons for absence, right, than they used to be. So I haven't seen anybody actually afford, like, a policy, at least in my immediate, district. But I'd be a huge proponent of it.
So for especially urban school districts and increasingly suburban school districts, as they are faced with similar pressures in their community and with their populations, a lot of these students are coming into classrooms or coming into schools with a whole host of other burdens that they're bringing in with them. And so I can see a mental health week as being, a really good thing if you have all the resources at home too. But you have kids who go to school because that's where they eat. That's where they have access to the most food, right? School can be a break from all those other pressures, right? So they're seeking out actually a break from maybe worse things at home. A lot of folks in the city of Cleveland receive things like utility assistance. So you're talking about, homes that may not be adequately heated or, right? And, where are we affording those students, maybe not the mental health week, but the come into school and get other resources week, where it's not necessarily in the classroom, but a whole host of other wraparound services that you may need. So come to the school, but you may not have to go to class, or it's talk to this person, or we'll help you sign up for this, or sit and talk to somebody, or just sit and read in a quiet space, whatever those additional needs are also.
Right. I've seen tremendous strides, particularly in Cleveland district with, I don't know if you're familiar with the Say Yes initiative in Cleveland, and those Say Yes coordinators in schools are filling exactly the types of needs you're talking about. And I've been very fortunate to be, I've been in a number of CMSD schools over the years through our programs and whatnot, and I have met some absolutely fantastic individuals who do that sort of thing. And now Cleveland finally has, I want to say, like, all their schools are Say Yes schools now, or will be in the coming year, will have that available. But that's Cleveland, and I don't even know, when we talk about our first ring suburbs, it's like they're not hugely qualitatively different than Cleveland proper. Not you. Some of them are, some of them are not, and I don't know that, it's like, this is the interesting thing about education is, like, it's such a fundamental, structure of our society. I mean, it just genuinely is a pillar of our society that operates on a very piecemeal basis, right? That we go down all the way to the local level of, different districts. And so, gosh, we can get into how we fund education, the inequity in that by itself. And it's like, this type of problem at this point, we still haven't resolved this. Like, we still haven't really gotten this right. I don't know. I mean, it's, at this point, it's sort of becoming almost, it's like, what, do we value this or don't we value it?
Everyone has one. every place has a school district.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet they are so disconnected from each other.
So disconnected from each other,
Yeah.
so unequally funded, addressed, access to different resources, the way they operate. I mean, it's just
The times they start,
the times
you're talking about the platforms they
But
use.
it's the curriculum and how the curriculum is taught for for the years and years and years. You talk about the different ways that history is taught depending on where you are in the United States.
right.
You
Right.
know? And
Right.
or science and now math and
Right. And these things are driven, I mean, not to veer too politically, but these things are driven by the constituency and not necessarily by folks in the profession, right? And that's becoming a real, hot topic.
which
right
I think
now,
is why I like them to go completely full circle, why I like the merger of education and urban studies, because it's our students going out there working to fund education. It's our students that will understand what, schools need, and then vice versa, teachers understanding how is it that policy is running their lives,
Right.
how they can have the voice in policy, how they can act on their behalf. And it's just that merger together that I think
Yeah.
is hopefully going to help out education
Yeah.
in the future.
It makes a lot of sense. And we need to be more than just neighbors. We need to really intimately know how one affects the other and the impacts of how we commingle. And I do think, the merger just, having the opportunity to interact more with the faculty and more with the student population. And I'd love opportunities to talk with urban faculty about how might we use the center in your courses? You know what I mean? That we could give students a real opportunity, even if just to shadow students in education, see what they're doing, see what they're, what that field is about, just to have that sort of background knowledge when they go into their own, interest areas in urban development planning, whatever it might be.
I feel like the students are the same thing. They have the same mission. They don't want to be teachers, but they still want all of our students at Urban. They want to help.
Right.
They don't know how to help out, and
Right.
they don't want to be an educator, but that doesn't mean that education isn't first on their mind.
Absolutely.
And it's a way to go into education. So this is where I am excited for this, and I love the idea of your center. I love what you're doing down there, and all the snaps for you for getting and I think about getting us in place to do virtual because, as Dr. Fauci has said, as the CDC has said, this has become an endemic. We are going to see rises and falls, and who knows what's coming down the line. Right. And now we are more prepared to take, say, even if the flu is ravaging the school, say, we'll take a month of virtual learning.
And, in real time, one of the things that we developed policy-wise in the center was that even as we move back to in-person, we retain the remote to the degree that, so let's say I have a tutor and a tutee, and for whatever reason, and it doesn't have to be sickness, right? Family's car broke down. We can't make it. We're like, cool, okay, log on to the Zoom room. We have an ongoing open Zoom room. Log on there, and then my tutor in the center who is in person, I'm like, hey, your kid's not coming. Go to this computer, log on, and there's the kid, and we just, in the moment, make that connection again, right? So it's flexible in the sense that, we don't need these elaborate call-off procedures or whatnot. We just need these really dynamic in real-time pieces to respond to what's happening in front of us. So I have a tutor in the center. Kid's not there yet. Casey or Sydney, the program, the office manager there, makes a call. Hey, where you at? Oh my gosh, stuck in traffic. Okay, well, log on. And I've had kids log on their phone in the back seat. They're on the phone in the back seat in a Zoom room. And my tutor's over here in the Zoom room, okay, and they're talking to the kid. And at the very least, they're making a connection, right? Yeah. So maybe we're not doing the most work that day. You don't have pen and paper in front of you or whatever. But our students have been fantastic in finding ways to make that connection in the moment, with little lead time to say, this is what's happening right now. And in the center, we just had the opportunity, thank you, Dr. Jackson, to purchase a number of additional Chromebooks. And these Chromebooks are for the purpose of loaning to families. We have a student, he's a great kid, always attends or calls, but the issue is his computer at home doesn't work. Like the internet, it just doesn't work. Mom is really like on it. She, these are parents who, and I always say this, even if kids are not attending perfectly, I want you to keep in mind, these are families who care enough that at the end of the day, they're picking up their kid to say, hey, we're going to go do more, we're going to go do tutoring.
We're going to do more school for you.
Right. So this is a family that really values education, just want to put that on the table. But this student, and we'll see him, he'll be late. Then he logs on 15 minutes later and he's in the library. So he's going to another space to try to connect. And it's like when you see people going to these lengths, it's like we have to find ways to meet those needs. And it really just has to be a way that we can do in real time in the moment. So we have these Chromebooks, to be able to go out, lend out to families, for this period of time and whatnot to make that connection, especially when we see kids who want to be there, try to be there, do well when they're there. I don't want these sort of obstacles to be the reason they're not engaged. So these are all pieces that we've kind of built into how we respond now to our enrollments, so when families enroll, they know that, there's we'll have like a lending agreement to, for these Chromebooks to go out and that sort of thing. And it's all part of the registration system that we developed for the website. So it's trying to make these pieces fill these holes, where we can.
Yeah. I'm excited to say that, maybe end of next academic year, right? We can come back and talk and say, what has changed and what have schools really more successfully implemented and what has stuck.
Right. Yeah.
Now that we're getting back to this pattern of, normal face-to-face regularity.
Right.
What have school districts really adopted and what have they really learned?
Yeah, and I think it's wide open. There's a lot on the table. I know that I personally am part of some planning groups. Eric Gordon, the CEO in CMSD, is very forward-thinking. I'm excited about the ways in which many people have risen to the opportunity and see it as an opportunity. Not it. We definitely know it's a challenge. Yeah, we know that. Right. But also, really risen to the opportunity. And I think our teachers are some of the most dynamic bunch of people and professionals that want to really make sure that we're helping kids. So I always say this to my students, everyone's a good actor here. Everyone's a good actor for their strengths and their weaknesses and what have you. Parents, kids, teachers, administrators, faculty, we're all good actors. Mm-hmm. And so it's just finding, well, what do you do and what can't you do? Right. And being okay with saying, I can't really do that. Right. I'm not good at that.
We're all there for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. How do we make it work?
Mm-hmm. It's a community effort.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And I am looking forward to that. We'll have to come back next year.
And what really has...
Check in and be like, what's happening now?
What's happening now?
And we have some, at the center, we have some grant application. Like I mentioned before, that funding came in real time. And what we're seeing now is some of that funding really filtering down to the schools. So we have some grant applications out there to scale up our programming, to do more with even more kids and more districts. So fingers crossed. I mean, I'm hoping that comes through and that we can continue to do the work we do, because I know my staff, Casey and Sydney, we're small but mighty. Mm-hmm. They do such good work, and we have such good plans and efforts. So I just want to see it all blossom to fruition. So just like now, we're in the springtime of our development. There's buds there, there's things we can do, and they'll grow. Hopefully we're not covered in snow. Yeah. I don't know what analogy that is, but
it eventually thaws.
It always thaws.
Fingers crossed. Well, I'm so glad that we had this conversation about coming back into back into in-person. Mm-hmm. As our first podcast is back in person. So I want to thank you so much for coming in to have this conversation. Molly, thank you as always for coming and talking with us today and being part of this. It's always nice that
you let me come with you.
I know, right? Come, beg, whatever.
You let me tag along.
Let you tag along. I really appreciate it. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to subscribe and like so we know this is what's going on. And check out more podcasts in the future and check out new ones that are coming that, we have in the past. And one day, Molly will retape our podcast. I will talk forever about our lost podcast.
The Lost Podcast.
The Lost Podcast.
Pandemic podcast.
That's right. It's what's lost in the pandemic, that one. All right. Well, thank you so much, and everyone have a fantastic day.
Thank you.